So I wanted to show you a little bit about Washington's Crossing. And this is the Delaware River on the New Jersey side. So I do hike down there. And then this is like a rapids area where people practice their kayaking. But I'm going to show you the Pennsylvania side where Washington crossed. But he crossed over here. And then the troops had to make their way down to Trenton. It's a few miles down. So this is what they would have been passing. This is what the terrain they would have seen. And within a few weeks, like over this winter, this is what the river looked like. So this is around the time that Washington crossed the Delaware, which was on Christmas Day. And here I'm back in the Pennsylvania side in Washington's Crossing Park. So there's a Washington's Crossing, Pennsylvania, and then there's another one on the other side, Washington's Crossing, New Jersey. So this is the Pennsylvania side. And this is a nice big open area park. And it does make sense why they were here, why the troops were here, because it's a nice big area that could accommodate them. And this is the McConkey Ferry Inn, and it's a tavern and also has rooms upstairs. But you can see how close the road is to this inn. And this is a bridge that now crosses the river here. It used to be a Lenape ferry. But this is where Washington planned the whole thing, and it's right on the bank of the Delaware River here. And I just wanted to show you too this root cellar, which used to hold a lot of apples, and I would imagine like the cider and the hard cider and all of that for the tavern. So Washington wrote a letter from this tavern at 6 p.m., which would have been dark. And so the thought is that the crossing was already occurring at that point. But we know that Washington was still sitting in this tavern at 6 p.m., even though it probably got dark like an hour before that. So we assume that the crossing was going on at that point. But Washington was still on the Pennsylvania side. So I'm going to be showing you the garden at one of these homes. It's like a historic garden, and it's so beautiful. But I just wanted to show you quickly, like the river here, and then these root cellars. So pretty important to what was going on at the time. So a lot of these other buildings kind of popped up after the crossing, because you can imagine it made this area a really important area. But I just kind of want to show you the terrain here. And this side of the river was a lot more wooded with trees. Our trees have thinned out just in the last few years. We've had some pretty serious storms, but it was more wooded. So here is another root cellar. So, kind of true to like the way Washington was, this whole area was very mindful of farming and storing things. We had a lot of mills going on. But on this property alone, there's several of these root cellars here. And I have been inside of this once, and it seemed nice and roomy. And they did say that they would store like their canned items, back in the day. Because winters then were probably rougher than they are now. Other than this last winter was really rough. But the food preservation was a big deal. So here is the boat barn, and these are reproductions of the old Durham boats, and you can see they're monstrous sized boats. And I love that they're painted black, and there's cannons in here as well. But to see like them crossing in the dark with these like boats painted black, I'm just like, I just love this. So here are the oars or the paddles that would help them get across the river. So our river is super swift. It's not super deep, but it is very swift and dangerous. So they definitely would have needed all this to try. I would imagine they're trying to go straight across the river. So that area where I showed you to begin with has like a few islands in the middle. But in this area, it's narrower, I think. I mean, it sure looks narrower. And then there's no islands in the middle. So this is a good point to cross the river. And then hopefully when you're going downriver, it gives you a little bit of protection against people seeing all the troops. So here's a little like lean-to where I would imagine they were throwing like canvas over this for protection. But my goodness, like in the middle of like our cold, icy snowstorm, and apparently there was a storm going on that day as well, it would be very difficult to stay warm. So really feeling for the troops. And then here's like a recreation of, I think, like a smoker, kind of a fire pit going on here. So I would imagine that this kind of thing would be back from the river. They're not going to be showing that they're like starting fires and smoke and all of that, even though there were people living in this area, but probably not like enough that if there was a lot of activity, it would probably alert them that there were soldiers over on this side. So here we're walking up to the Hibbs house, and then let me just show you quickly. This is a smithy. So we have a lot of festivals here, so they'll like open everything up, and we have like the cannons going off, and just all sorts of fun stuff happens in this park, during the year. So here's the Hibbs house, and this is an historic garden. So all the plants in here are authentic to 1776. And I just wanted to show you this garden just because I find it really interesting, like how gardens are laid out and the design of the gardens. And then in this garden, I just love the fact that they're all different size garden beds, but it's very like rigid and geometric, which I think is true to that period. But then they use like the thin bricks, they put them on their sides, and they use that as like edging for the garden. And I'm positive that every detail here is authentic to the period. So here we have like the soil that's in this garden, but not very much mulch at all. So they're like hand weeding everything. And I would imagine they want all the plants to pop up. If they mulch at all, I'm not totally sure if they mulch at all. I don't know if that's like a historic thing. So one of the volunteers was here, and she was watering at the time. And that was great because I got the opportunity to like turn the camera off and talk to her for a while about, the way this is all structured. And that was really fascinating. And I just love that these people are very open to talking about what they've done here. So you can see some of these beds are super narrow, and then they fan out to like really wide. So in this garden, there's a lot of things that I recognized, even though there's a lot of plants that I don't, like, they're historic things that we don't necessarily grow these days. But there's a lot of bearded irises. This is pincushion flower, the scabiosa. There's coreopsis in here, tick seed. There are purple coneflowers, and forgive me if I repeat myself. It's just that the plants would repeat themselves throughout all the different gardens, and then it was just so much. I mean, I would have guessed there were like hundreds of different kinds of plants in here. But one thing I definitely noticed was that the plants, they had flowers mixed in with medicinal plants, and then mixed in with herbs. And then some vegetables, but most of the vegetables are like on their own in different gardens, and I'll show you that as well. But they had snapdragons, which surprised me. They had columbines, and they seemed like they liked to companion plant the snapdragons and the columbines together. So I thought that was really neat. They definitely had a lot of bee balm. So here we're going towards the shed area, and again, I was interested that they have like a little lip around the shed, and then it's filled with rocks. So I'm not totally sure why that's being done, but like I said, it's like every single thing they're doing is very intentional. And there were also a lot of flat rocks in the middle of all these gardens, and I love that. I would imagine that's so that you can have the bees and butterflies and birds can kind of perch on these rocks, and maybe if there's a little water. So here's the vegetable garden. And these tall branches are holding up the bean plants, and they're just using everything, from resources that they would have had at the time. And then there's rocks like surrounding the garden. And then here, I love this. It's like a water barrel. So they're just collecting rainwater and maybe filling it with a hose if they need to. So here's the vegetable garden. Things are planted in rows, and there was Swiss chard. There were beans and peas and lettuce. And I'm going to look at my notes here because there was so much going on. So they had beets, they had pumpkins, they had squash and carrots, and I think I said spinach and lettuce and Swiss chard. And then they're covered with straw, and I would imagine because we've had some very cold nights. So I'm guessing they're trying to like prevent them from getting burned by the cold. And here's the peas, I believe. So they're using just sticks to, have these things being trained going upright. And then in the whole garden, there was a lot of herbs going on. So then one of the coolest things was they had these rocks, like round rocks that were painted black. And then they had, I'm guessing, like with an acrylic marker, they would paint on them the name of the plant and then its scientific name, so that you would know like exactly what plant is in here. Because that's one thing I noticed, that they had not just like one type of a plant, they would have like multiple types of the same plant. So and this is wormwood, and this was one of the most like vigorous plants right now. And then they had a lot of these bearded irises, so these are white. And then it looked to me like a lot of purple coneflowers. So here's rosemary on both sides of this house. And this house is where they like demonstrate like hearth cooking and stuff. So it is pretty cool that they had this garden right here. So these, I believe, are the wild bee balm. And I looked at a list. It said in here is chamomile, calendula, corn poppies, milk thistle, borage, irises, rhubarb, comfrey, lovage, mountain mint, and asparagus. She showed me specifically asparagus. And then here's a wild rose. So I was very inspired by this, and I was also very overwhelmed because I just could not believe the diversity of plants in here. So again, they had this combination of the snapdragons and the columbines, which I thought was really beautiful. And I don't know if I mentioned they had like tick seed, the coreopsis, they had scabiosa in here. They had just so many different plants. And I did not realize this, but apparently it says they sell the seeds in the gift shop, so I'm going to have to check that out. So here we're back at the McConkey Ferry Inn. So when I'm here, I get a real sense of just feeling, there's like strong vibes here, like strong feeling of, I think, George Washington and just like our country. Why are we here? So I just wanted to read the last line of Washington's Sunday morning prayer. He had different prayers for morning and evening in the week. And basically it says, "Bless my family, kindred, friends, and country. Be our God and guide this day and forever for his sake, who lay down in the grave and arose again for us. Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen." So a lot of times when I'm here, I'm just picturing George Washington standing in front of this inn, like down by the riverbank, and praying for the crossing of this river. And I think it's so fitting, like in this 250th anniversary of our country, that we are also praying. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed being here. So thank you so much.